Eastern Europe remains one of the most underrated regions for migration, and that's causing many people to dismiss it without truly understanding what it offers. While everyone keeps looking at the same countries, this region still provides lower migration competition, lower living costs, and real pathways to study, work, and legally settle in Europe. In this video, I'll explain why countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and even Russia continue to be very interesting alternatives for migration, which types of profiles fit best in each one, and why, for many people, Eastern Europe can be a better decision than the so-called trendy destinations. Hello, foreign friends. I'm Tyler, and I'm part of the LivinEurope team, where we help people who want to migrate to Europe understand which country truly fits their profile, budget, and goals. If this content is useful to you, subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about migration with real information, without idealizing countries. And remember, at LivinEurope we offer free personalized consultations. To access them, you just need to message us on Instagram, and we'll explain the conditions there. Now let's get into the topic. When we talk about Eastern Europe, we're not talking about a single reality. Each country has different migration rules, different education systems, and specific opportunities depending on whether you're coming to study, work, or combine both. Poland and the Czech Republic stand out for their universities, employment opportunities, and stability. Romania and Bulgaria for their low costs and accessibility. Hungary for its location and international programs. And Russia for offering educational pathways, even for those who don't speak other languages at the beginning. Understanding these differences is key, because Eastern Europe is not a second option. It's a strategic region for people who want to migrate intelligently, not just follow trends. Poland, very cost-effective to start in Europe. Poland is one of the most underrated countries for migration in 2026, especially if you're coming with a medium budget and want a clear study or work pathway. To put numbers on the table, Poland's minimum wage in 2026 is set at 4,806 PLN gross per month, and that strongly shapes the reality of entry-level jobs. Now, the data almost nobody checks before migrating: unemployment. According to the latest harmonized data published by Eurostat, Poland ranks among the countries with the lowest unemployment rates in the European Union. In practice, this means that if you choose your sector and city wisely, it's easier to access your first job than in countries with higher unemployment. There is a growing Latin American presence in Poland, but in overall numbers, it's still relatively small compared to other nationalities. A strong indicator is the formal labor market. Official data on foreign workers shows that most come from neighboring countries, with Latin Americans still representing the minority. For example, Colombia has been reported as one of the Latin American countries with a noticeable presence, although far from the top overall. Regarding the student visa, Poland is usually very applicable if you have a real admission letter, insurance, accommodation, and provable funds. The biggest friction is usually not the visa itself, but choosing the right school, the right program, and preparing your application properly to avoid delays. Czech Republic: European quality, more moderate costs, decent employment. The Czech Republic is a country many Latin Americans overlook, but in 2026, it can be a very smart move if you want Central Europe with solid infrastructure and more controlled costs than Germany or the Netherlands. According to the Czech Ministry of Labor, the minimum monthly wage in 2026 is 22,400 CZMKs gross. In terms of unemployment, the Czech Republic usually ranks among the countries with low unemployment rates within the EU, which helps a lot if your priority is to find work relatively quickly, especially in logistics, industry, services, and certain roles where basic English plus Czech in progress is acceptable. Are there many Latin Americans in the Czech Republic? Historically, the largest foreign groups are not Latin American. Eastern European and Asian nationalities dominate. That's not a bad thing. It means the country isn't saturated by migration trends. But it does require a more strategic approach to language, city choice, and type of employment. The student visa is fully viable, but the key is understanding that outside Prague, living costs drop significantly, and the student experience can be much more budget-friendly. The essentials are an accredited program, sufficient funds, insurance, and a well-justified academic plan. Romania, the no perfect English required route with low costs. This is one of the most underrated pathways if your goal is to migrate without depending on perfect English from day one. Romania has a national minimum wage in lei, and it has been gradually adjusted over time. For 2026, a planned increase to 4,325 RON gross has been reported as part of announced adjustments. In terms of unemployment, Romania usually sits in a mid to low range within the EU compared to countries like Spain or Greece, which creates real opportunities if your expectation is to enter a less expensive market. Are there many Latin Americans in Romania? It's not a mass Latin destination like Spain, but that's precisely why it can be attractive if you want to avoid hyper-competitive markets. The strong point: Romania has many universities offering preparatory language years, depending on the degree, especially in medical and technical fields, with fairly structured pathways. The student visa is often one of the most straightforward if the university is legitimate and your file is clean: admission letter, proof of funds, insurance, and accommodation. What usually causes problems is improvising with unreliable schools or misunderstanding deadlines. Bulgaria. Cheap, not saturated, but city choice matters. Bulgaria is one of those countries people ignore, and that's exactly why it can work. Its main strength is a low cost of living, especially outside Sofia. For 2026, Bulgaria has announced an adjustment of the minimum wage to 1,077 bgran gross per month. In unemployment terms, Bulgaria usually sits around the EU average. It's not the easiest job market for all sectors, but if your strategy is to study, save money, and live cheaply while building your profile, it can make sense. Are there Latin Americans in Bulgaria? It's not a major destination for Latin Americans. That means fewer Latin networks, but also less trend-driven competition. Success here depends heavily on whether your plan is studies, remote work, or a very specific job niche. Hungary, Budapest as a magnet, but strategy is key. Hungary can be a good bridge if you want an attractive capital like Budapest, with good urban life and generally lower costs than Western Europe. For 2026, an agreement has been reported to raise the minimum wage to 328,600 HUF gross per month. Unemployment in Hungary is relatively low by European standards, which helps if your plan includes working. However, the Hungarian language can be a bigger barrier than in other countries. Are there Latin Americans in Hungary? It's not a top destination, but Budapest attracts many international students, which makes integration easier. The key advice here is not to rely on a "I'll arrive and see" approach. Define in advance whether your route is studies, a specific job, or remote work. Russia, non-EU option, useful if your priority is studying the language first. Russia is not part of the European Union, but for some profiles it can still be a viable route, especially if your goal is to study with a preparatory language year and then enter a bachelor's or master's program. Regarding minimum wage, Russia uses the MROT system, and for 2026, a minimum wage of 22,440 ruble has been reported. Unemployment in Russia is measured using statistical systems different from Eurostat, so it's not responsible to compare it one-to-one with EU countries. What can be said practically is that choosing Russia must be a strategic decision, considering degree recognition, future mobility, and academic goals. Are there Latin Americans in Russia? There are student communities in certain cities, but it's not a mainstream Latin destination like Spain. When chosen, it's usually for a specific academic field, language interest, and lower costs. Student visas can be more straightforward if you have an official university acceptance and meet requirements, but current context and future mobility should always be reviewed. To wrap up, keep this key idea in mind. Eastern Europe is not a second option. It's a strategic alternative for many people who want to migrate in 2026 without competing in saturated markets or taking on impossible costs from the start. Countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, or Hungary offer lower salaries than Western Europe, yes, but also lower unemployment in several sectors, much more affordable living costs, and study and residence processes that, when done properly, can be more realistic for many Latin American profiles. The most common mistake is migrating based on trends or social media, without analyzing real data like minimum wage, unemployment, language, student visa requirements, and adaptability. Each country works differently, and what works perfectly for one person can seriously complicate the process for another. If you're thinking about migrating to Europe and don't know which country suits you best, which pathway to use, or whether your profile fits better with studies, work, or a combination of both, at LivinEurope we're offering free personalized consultations. To access one, message us on Instagram and we'll send you the conditions to book it. Let us know in the comments, which Eastern European country are you most curious about, or which one would you like us to cover in a deeper video? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.